Dungeons & Dragons has dragons in its name, and throughout the decades of its publication history, there were dozens of dragon types. Most people probably know of the 5 chromatic dragons and 5 metallic dragons, but the dragon kind is much more diverse and complicated. Their categorization has changed from edition to edition and from book to book, and if you are building your own D&D style setting, things may get confusing. This may attempt at untangling this mess by creating something like a taxonomy chart, using materials from all D&D editions. First, we have to figure out if the dragons have a common ancestor. The origin of the dragon kind differs in different books. The AD&D 2e Draconomicon presents a hypothesis that dragons evolved from dinosaurs, as evidenced by fossils. The common dragon ancestor was called Io Draco, and it had several offshoots: Io Draco Orientalis, the ancestor of the long dragons, unnamed offshoots that evolved into the wyverns, drakes, dragonets, and multi-headed dragons, and Igni Draco. Igni Draco was the supposed ancestor of the intelligent dragons, and had 2 offshoots, Ferrous Draco and Infernal Draco, the ancestors of the metallic and chromatic dragons, respectively. But that's just one controversial hypothesis from Toriel. The D&D 4e Draconomicon states that dragons were created by Io, the head of the draconic pantheon. Finally, Dragon Magazine 158 seems to imply that the dragons were created by the Old Ones, primordial deities that created the multiverse before the current generation of gods founded. The article also claims that the dragons are related to the Dreadens, another creation of the Old Ones. If that's true, then the dragons may be the oldest mortal form of intelligent life, even older than the aboleths. But who cares about that? Let's talk about the dragons of the D&D present, not past. Let's explore the true dragons. True dragons differ from others in the way they age. They are very long-lived creatures that become more and more powerful the older they get. The number of game mechanical age categories differs between D&D editions. I have to know that there are some other draconic creatures that progress through age categories in the same way, but are not true dragons, such as certain sea serpents and drakes. There are many different categories of true dragons. Chromatic dragons are the creations of Tiamat, the evil dragon goddess. Tiamat has 5 heads of different colors that correspond to the most well-known chromatic dragons: black dragons, blue dragons, green dragons, red dragons, and white dragons. That's probably the most commonly encountered dragons in D&D games. However, Dragon Magazine Compendium Volume 1 says that some sages believe that Tiamat used to have a rival sister, who spawned 3 other chromatic dragons before being killed by Tiamat. The orange dragons are alligator-like monsters that prefer to live in rivers and similar aquatic environments. They are known for their unique breath weapon, an oily mixture that explodes after reacting with air or water. The illustration clearly doesn't show any wings, but the stats say that the dragon can fly. Wings or flight is not mentioned anywhere in the description, so it seems to me that there is something wrong here, and there sure is, because the original source of this dragon, that is Dragon Magazine 248, has an illustration with wings. It also says that orange dragons sometimes are known as sodium dragons. The purple dragons, sometimes known as energy dragons, believe themselves to be the lords of all dragonkind. Incredibly intelligent and manipulative, they often rule kingdoms of humans or dwarves. These powerful dragons have 3 different breath weapons: a cone of searing energy, a blinding flash, and a deadly blade of pure energy. The yellow dragons, sometimes known as salt dragons, are wingless, but are still able to fly through the air. Once of the physically weakest dragons, they rely on agility and its salt breath weapon to overpower enemies. However, this is where things get more confusing. There is another yellow dragon in the AD&D 2e Draconomicon that is different from the previous one. These desert-dwelling reclusive dragons hunt in a fashion that resembles an antlion. So if you want to use both of these dragons in your games, you probably should rename the first yellow dragon to Salt Dragon to avoid confusion. If we dig deeper, we can find the third yellow dragon in Dragon Magazine 38. This one is a shape-shifting creature that enjoys the company of man and is incredibly gullible. Its mentality and abilities are very different from the previous two yellow dragons. EN World's creature catalog renamed it to Master Dragon, to avoid confusion with the other two. Should it belong to the Chromatic category? Why not? Officially, it does not, but it seems fine to me to include it. The same Dragon magazine issue also has another orange dragon. These ones are characterized by a very close bond between mated pairs. Close enough that if one dragon dies, its partner would die several days later. Its signature ability is camouflage. It can change its coloration to appear as any other chromatic or metallic dragon. EN World's creature catalog renamed it to Chameleon Dragon to avoid confusion. Its alignment is said to be lawful neutral, but I still think that it should be okay to include it in the Chromatic Dragon category, even if it isn't there officially. Confusion doesn't end there, as there is another purple dragon. I am talking about the Deep Dragon. It existed in D&D since the 2nd edition, but it was renamed to Purple Dragon in 4e, and then back to Deep Dragon in 5e. In 4e, this underground revealing dragon was assigned to the Chromatic Dragon category, while none of the other editions seems to do so. So if you want to avoid confusion with the other purple dragon, either call this one Deep Dragon or call the other one Energy Dragon. The color spectrum doesn't end there, as we also have Fang Dragons. These spiky dragons usually do not have a breath weapon but have a poisonous tail sting. In D&D 4e, they were assigned to the Chromatic Dragon category and renamed to Grey Dragons. The alternative Grey Dragon name appeared even before that, however. Why I insist on calling them Fang Dragons? Because there is another Grey Dragon, in Bestiary of Kryn Revised. The Grey Dragons of the Dragonlance setting are smaller, weaker but more intelligent sub-race of White Dragons. Okay, what colors are missing? Brown Dragons appeared in AD&D 2e as evil, wingless dragons that live in the deserts. These burrowing dragons could breathe acid and create sandstorms. And here's something that I disagree with. D&D 4e seems to have merged the brown dragon with the sand dragon from Sandstorm. It also assigned this new brown dragon to the Chromatic Dragon category. But why? The only commonality between the brown and sand dragons is their habitat. They look very different, they have different mentality. One has wings and can fly and the other cannot. One can breathe acid and the other can breathe flay wind, and their elemental resistances and spell-like abilities are different. So while I think that brown dragons should indeed belong to the Chromatic category, I think that they and the sand dragons are two different species, with the sand dragon not being chromatic. This is the hill I will die on. Screw you, D&D 4e Draconomicon. Oh wait, Dragon Magazine 38 also has another brown dragon. This one is attuned to nature, able to shapeshift and communicate with Fae, and is neutral. These forest protectors were renamed to Urban Dragons in the EN World Creature Catalog. Should they be chromatic? I guess if I included Chameleon and Master Dragons, then why not include this one as well? Perhaps some of the Tiamat's creations ended up not being as evil as she wanted them to be. Or maybe there was another rival sister who created them, who knows. Dragon Magazine 146 also has the Rainbow Dragon, the most powerful of all evil dragons. These beautiful iridescent creatures can reflect light off their scales to blind creatures around them, and breathe prismatic light that deals elemental damage of all types. Officially, that's it. However, there is also the Pink Dragon, that I believe should count as a Chromatic Dragon, even though the description doesn't say anything about it. They were introduced in an April Fool's article in Dragon Magazine 156, but I think with some minor tweaks, it can be a proper monster. Also, Ed Greenwood confirmed that they are canon and actually exist in the Forgotten Realms setting, and they are even mentioned in a novel. Another large group of dragons is the Metallic Dragons. Bahamut, the Platinum Dragon, is a divine pattern. The 5 major metallic species are Brass Dragons, Bronze Dragons, Copper Dragons, Gold Dragons, and Silver Dragons. They probably are well known to every D&D player. However, we have some lesser known ones. Mercury dragons are, well, mercurial. Impulsive and whimsical, they nonetheless are mostly benevolent. Just like most other metallic dragons, they can shapeshift, but unlike most other metallic dragons, they only have one breath weapon, a beam of searing light. Electrum dragons are reclusive but peaceful dragons who enjoy arts and debates. Their breath weapon is a cone of weakening and confusing gas. Mithril dragons were introduced in Practical Planetology, a spelljammer supplement. These dragons spent their entire lives flying and were seen on the ground only when injured. In D&D 4e, their spelling changed to Mithril dragons, and they officially became part of the metallic dragon group. The 4e Mithril dragons have abilities that are similar but not identical to the Spelljammer dragon, so I'm not sure if they are supposed to be the same species or two different ones. I'm inclined to say that they are the same. Finally, Orium dragons were introduced in D&D 4e. These dragons are obsessed with ancient ruins and their history. Their tails were exceedingly long, and their breath weapon turned into a vaporous serpent upon being released. And now the confusion begins, because one may think that this is where the metallic dragon category stops, but one may disagree. Depending on the edition, D&D assigns some other dragons as metallic. For example, D&D 4e Draconomicon says that adamantine, iron, cobalt and steel dragons are metallic dragons. The previous editions seem to disagree. 4e adamantine dragons are very different from the adamantine dragons of the previous editions in demeanor, abilities and habitat. I think they are supposed to be two different species, so I suggest you remain the 4e variety as cave dragons to avoid confusion. This is one of the alternative names suggested in Draconomicon. I'll mention the 3e version later. One of the much lesser known true dragon groups is the Ferrous dragons. They were first introduced in Dragon Magazine 170 and then updated to D&D 3.5 in Dragon Magazine 356, and I prefer them to be separate from the metallic dragons. Chromium dragons can breathe cold or a stream of ice crystals. They are cruel and territorial, but fortunately for most adventurers, they usually only live in Arctic mountains. Cobalt dragons are adept trap makers and, as some believe, are the main progenitors of the Cobalt race. Their breath weapon is very unique, a magnetic pulse. Iron dragons are the most powerful of the Ferrous dragons. They use their shapeshifting abilities to learn more about the world to be able to dominate it eventually. Nickel dragons are the weakest of the Ferrous dragons. Their abilities and outward appearance are quite similar to the black dragons. Tungsten dragons are the only generally benevolent Ferrous dragons. Despite that, they are very territorial, and hence mostly preoccupied with the development of their domains. D&D 4e Draconomicon assigns Cobalt dragons and Iron dragons to the metallic category, but I prefer them to be in their original place. Steel dragons, also known as Greyhawk dragons that spend most of their time in human form, also are assigned to the metallic category both in 4e and 3e, but I think that they would work better as Ferrous dragons. The next large category of dragons is the Planar dragons. Just like their name implies, they are native to the other planes of existence. Most of them were introduced in Draconomicon for 3e. Battle dragons are valiant warriors and steeds hailing from the heroic domains of Isgard. Chaos dragons are mutable creatures from the ever-changing chaos of Limbo. Ethereal dragons are ephemeral and inquisitive beings from the ethereal plane. Howling dragons are horrific and insane dragons from the windswept depths of Pandemonium. Oceanus dragons are serpentine beings that protect the river Oceanus that connects the upper planes. Pyroclastic dragons are embodiments of fire and earth from the bleak eternity of Gehenna. Radiant dragons are paragons of virtue from the seven mountain heavens of Celestia. Rust dragons are embodiments of decay and corruption from the infernal battlefield of Acheron. Shadow dragons are worms tied to the plane of shadow. While officially they do not belong to the Planar dragon category, I don't see why they would not. There is also a much lesser known subrace of the shadow dragons called Drow dragon. The only difference is that they can shapeshift between the dragon and drow forms. Styx dragons are the lower plane counterparts of the Oceanus dragons. Tartarian dragons are at once wardens and prisoners of the Tartarian depths of Carcery. There also were the Hellfire worms from Monster Manual 2. These infernal beings inhabited the 9 hells of Baator. They aren't given age categories like true dragons, but they are listed as such in Dragon Magazine. Dragon Magazine 321 also introduced some more planar dragons. Adamantine dragons are the self-appointed guardians of the twin paradises of Baitopia. They are kind and helpful. As I mentioned before, they drastically differ from the adamantine dragons of D&D 4e, so I believe that they are supposed to be separate species. Arboreal dragons are nature-friendly, elf-loving dragons from the Olympian glades of Arborea. Axial dragons are utterly lawful dragons from the clockwork nirvana of Mechanus. Beast dragons are savage hunters from the wilderness of the Beastlands. Concordant dragons are the keepers of balance from the concordant domain of the Outlands. Dragon Magazine 344 introduced even more planar dragons. Astral dragons are graceful protectors of the astral plane. Coal dragons are terrifying monstrosities from the infinite layers of the abyss. Elysian dragons are jovial and hedonistic beings from the blessed fields of Elysium. Gloom dragons are gaunt and grim worms from the grey waste of Hades. Draconomicon 1 for D&D 4e also has some new stuff. Frostforged worms are demonically twisted white dragons from the abyss. I am not sure if they are a different species from the normal white dragons. Death Mask dragons are murderous soul-devouring monsters from the abyss that didn't even get their own illustration. Pact dragons are the descendants of the red dragons that originally formed a pact with the Githyanki. Mirage dragons inhabit the surface of Feywild, while the Wretch dragons inhabit the Feywild's Underdark. Blight dragons are another dragon species native to the Plane of Shadow. A Mind's Eye article also introduced the ectoplasmic dragons, unique to the demiplane of ectoplasm. Finally, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons for 5e placed Moonstone dragons as native to the Feywild. I think that's all of the planar dragons. Phew, another group done. Another major dragon group is the Gem dragons. These psionic dragons mostly live on the elemental planes. Sardior, the ruby dragon, is their patron deity, although D&D 5e seems to have killed him. That's a shame. Amethyst dragons live on the elemental plane of Earth. Their main psionic discipline is telekinesis. Crystal dragons live on the elemental plane of Air. They are the friendliest among the gem dragons. Their main psionic discipline is I don't know what. They seem to be into mind control and light control. Emerald dragons prefer underground environments. Their main psionic disciplines are divination and sound control. Sapphire dragons live on the elemental plane of Earth. Their main psionic discipline is psychoportation. Topaz dragons live on the elemental plane of water. Their main psionic discipline seems to be psychometabolism. A Mind's Eye article also added obsidian dragons. They live on the elemental plane of fire and are expert in pyrokinesis. I will say in advance that this is a completely different dragon from the obsidian dragon from Dragon Magazine 146. I'll mention that one later. Dragon Magazine 265 introduces the Belduril dragon that lives in volcanically active lands and feeds on the seismic energies. Its psionic disciplines are psychokinesis and psychometabolism. Dungeon Magazine 51 has the Prismatic dragon that is very closely related to the Gem dragons. This is not the same as the Prismatic dragon from the Epic Level Handbook. These dragons are extremely greedy and self-important. Aeon World's creature catalog renamed them as Tourmaline dragons to avoid confusion. Some people assign Ember dragons to the Gem dragon category, even though it's not stated in their description. I agree with this decision, and you will know why soon. Jacinth dragon also seem to be Gem dragons, even though it's not stated clearly. Exceedingly rare, they are known for their elusiveness and ability to teleport. Now there is something special here. The Gem dragons of Mystara are actually different. Mystara has the following non-psionic gem dragons: Amber dragons, crystalline dragons, jade dragons, onyx dragons, ruby dragons, and sapphire dragons. Mystaran amber dragons are different from the normal amber dragons. Mystaran crystalline dragons are different from the normal crystal dragons. And Mystaran sapphire dragons are different from the normal sapphire dragons. Ruby dragons do not even exist outside Mystara, as Sardior, the deity of gem dragons, is considered to be the only ruby dragon. Onyx dragons are new too. Jade dragons of Mystara are different from the other jade dragons that I'll talk about very soon. The next dragon group is the long dragons. They were introduced in Oriental Adventures and were barely expanded in other publications. These Oriental dragons have many unique features. The main one is that they all start as Yu-Long, carp dragon, and after a while transform into a random adult long dragon form, like a Pokemon. The adult forms all look very different from one another. For example, the serpentine Qianlong river dragon has a long body and short limbs. Li Long, earth dragon, looks more like a lion with peacock wings, the only long dragon with actual wings. Long Wang, sea dragon, closely resembles a dragon turtle. Pan Long, coiled dragon, doesn't have any limbs at all. Shen Long, spirit dragon, looks like something between a western dragon and a dinosaur. Tian Long, celestial dragon, looks like your traditional oriental dragon. Tun Mil Long, typhoon dragon, has a short, stocky body and a huge mouth. The only Yu Long dragon is a jade dragon from Monstrous Compendium Annual Volume 1. It is said to be the oriental cousin to the emerald dragon of the western world. The next dragon group is the Catastrophic dragons. They were introduced in the 4th edition and have never been seen since. These are the traitor dragons that fought against the gods at the dawn of time. To be honest, I find the entire Dawn War thing of the D&D 4e lame and way too retconny, and I ignore it in my games most of the time. However, it is easy to rework the background of this dragon group. This dragon group contains the following creatures: avalanche dragons, blizzard dragons, earthquake dragons, tornado dragons, typhoon dragons, volcanic dragons, and wildfire dragons. Unlike other true dragons, the catastrophic dragons are not composed of living flesh, but more or less are elemental beings in draconic shapes. If I had to expand this category, I would assign fire dragons and frost dragons from Bestiary of Kryn Revised to it. They fit both in terms of lore and abilities. The most powerful dragon group is, without a doubt, the epic dragons. This group is very small, containing only 3 dragon types: prismatic dragons, force dragons, and time dragons. Fortunately for everyone, they gravitate towards neutrality, as an evil monster of this power would wreak a lot of havoc. While I do say that they are the most powerful dragons, you should not forget about advanced dragons, also known as dragon overlords. Any true dragon can have a dragon overlord that may surpass an epic dragon in power. Next up, we have another small dragon group, the spell-jamming dragons. They all live in space and are capable of natural spell-jamming. Moon dragons inhabit lunar caverns, and their power waxes and wanes like the moon itself. Sun dragons are benevolent dragons that live on the surface of suns. Stellar dragons are serpentine seekers of knowledge that wander through wild space and Phlogiston. Radiant dragons, also known as celestial dragons, also inhabit wild space and Phlogiston. Funnily enough, we already have a radiant Planar dragon and a celestial long dragon, so the naming confusion continues. The final group of true dragons is the land dragons. Unlike other flightless draconic beings such as landworms and worms, land dragons do progress through the age categories like true dragons. The land dragons were introduced in Dragon Magazine 74. Arak dragons have vestigial wings with protruding bone spikes that they use as melee weapons, not to fly. It also possesses a choking gas breath weapon. Scintillating dragon possesses luminescent scales that may entrance the onlookers. These dragons can breathe a beam of shimmering energy that burns the victim immediately and leaves a lingering burning effect. Night dragons hunt in groups in darkness and use their blinding light breath weapon to blind and stun prey. Officially that is it, but I would also assign the Vishap from Al-Qadim setting to this category, as it fits very well. Albino worms have an ambiguous status. On one hand, they are clearly called dragonkin, and on the other hand, they progress through the age categories like true dragons. Since they are flightless, they would also work well in the land dragon category. Ratelier dragons of Fire Runes Shining South also are flightless, and I think they would fit well into this category. That's it for the dragon groups, but there are still some dragons that do not belong to any group. Let's call them miscellaneous dragons. Amphidragons look more like winged frogs and lizards. They are said to be crossbreeds of green and sea dragons. Aquatic dragons are water-breathing relatives of the terrestrial dragons. Evil and cruel, it possesses a breath weapon, a cone of adhesive particles that stick to everything in the area and then deal electrical damage upon reacting with water. But these are aquatic dragons from Dragon Magazine 134. There is another aquatic dragon from Bestiary of Kryn Revised. This one is a serpentine being with only 2 short claws and a camouflaging coloration. To avoid confusion, I suggest renaming the first aquatic dragon as Water Dragon. Bestiary dragons from Dragon Magazine 199 were based on the real-world medieval version of a dragon. They have no magical abilities and are less smart. Perhaps they could be used as a proto-dragon, a common ancestor of true dragons. Brain Stealer Dragon is what happens when a Mind Flayer tadpole is implanted to a dragon. Nothing good can happen from that. Brine dragons are another aquatic dragon species. Despite being violent, they rarely are seen on the sea surface unless there is a very tempting boatload of sailors to devour. Dragons of Cyrilia, known well as Cyrillian dragons, are all of the same species. There are no young Cyrillian dragons, as their race is dying out. Cloud dragons are creatures of ambiguous status. In D&D, they are true dragons, but in 3.5e, they were renamed as Storm Drakes and downgraded to a Drake. The two creatures aren't identical, but I assume that the 3.5e version is a revision. However, I guess we may still count them as true dragons for the purpose of completionism. Cobra dragons of Karatur, unlike most other true dragons, cannot use magic. Instead, they are highly resistant to it. These evil dragons are very fond of collecting skulls. Dracohydras are huge multi-headed dragons. Each head can breathe acid like a black dragon. Zalmus is a 3-headed dragon of the Horde lands. Unlike Gorinich, another multi-headed dragon, this is a true dragon, not a lesser dragon. Elder Brain Dragon is what happens when a Mind Flayer Elder Brain merges with a captured dragon. I guess this is an alternative to the Brain Stealer Dragon. Marsh dragons from Imagine Magazine 15 are reclusive swamp-dwelling dragons, rumored to be the result of a union between Tiamat and Anthraxis. They get along well with black dragons. Matstikan dragon, also known as rain dragons or Tlalocoatls, are limbless and serpentine, with a head at each end. One head is serpent-like and the other is a cross between a reptile and jaguar. Obviously, they live in Matstika and dispense rain. Mist dragons are solitary and philosophical creatures that live near waterfalls or coastlines. They can manipulate weather and assume a mist form. Obsidian dragons from Dragon Magazine 146 are different from the psionic obsidian dragons that I mentioned before. These ones live in the frigid north of Earth, the Greyhawk setting. Their breath weapon is very strange, a stream of black ice web. If you'd like to use both obsidian dragons, consider renaming these two, for example, Black Ice Dragon or something like that. Pearl dragons are neutral dragons that live near water. While not aquatic, they can hold their breath for a very long time. Sand dragons were mentioned before, and as I said, I don't believe that they should have been merged with the brown dragons. These aggressive but not evil dragons can burrow through the sand and breathe a cone of flay wind. However, what I did not mention before is that this dragon from Sandstorm is not the only one. There is another sand dragon from Dragon Magazine 134. This one has a worm-like wingless body with 4 very short limbs. Unlike previous sand dragons and brown dragons, these ones are quite friendly and non-aggressive. EN World's creature catalog renamed them as dune dragons to avoid confusion. Sea dragons of Kryn are different from the long wangs, the oriental sea dragons. However, just like its oriental counterpart, the sea dragon has a thick turtle shell. Song dragons have a penchant for bardic arts and an electrical breath. Song dragons of both genders can transform into an attractive female human. Spineworms are... what? Are they even dragons? Their D&D 3.5 version in Dungeon Magazine 110 made them into true dragons with proper age categories. But is it? I don't think so, but I'm not a Dark Sun expert. Stone dragons inhabit underground caverns. They are adept burrowers and are able to spew forth rocks. And now I'm done. As you can see, there is many more than just 10 dragon types in D&D. I counted 115 types, and this is only true dragons. I hope I did not miss any. Is this too many? Perhaps, but I don't mind it. With this variety, it is easy to spice up an adventure by replacing a common chromatic or metallic dragon with something more exotic. This isn't the type of videos I usually make, but if you'd like something else, perhaps a lesser dragon kind or giants or elementals, feel free to suggest me in the comments. Thank you for watching, I will see you next time.